Students, teachers, what's the best forgot to turn off the mic story during virtual learning? This is from a couple years ago. I was working for a private college which has several campuses. My campus was the online campus, and each year the campuses took turns hosting an annual writing conference for English and speech faculty. With it being the online campus's turn to host, we came up with the idea to make it a virtual conference which faculty members could attend from home or go to their own campus and attend with their peers in a classroom. Anyway, as one of the people on the conference committee, my job was to host several of the various breakout sessions, making sure the WebEx meeting was working, introduce the presenter of the session, monitor the Q&A, etc. I also made sure to mute the participants once it was time for the speaker to start. Since there was no live mic scenario, but one of the participants left his webcam on, during the presentation, he whips out a gigantic party sub and is just going to town on it. So while everyone is watching the presenter's PowerPoint, you just see this guy, who I had met before, and he was a legit 6'8" person, just scarfing down a party sub in a window in the bottom of the screen. Honestly, it was just more impressive than anything. PowerPoints are the peacocks of the business world. All show, no meat. Story 2. We had a graduation on Zoom for my Air Force Airman Leadership School. Parents were invited to attend, and someone's mother came in and, because she was the only one talking, became center stage. She was looking down with the screen way too close and said the following. Okay, I think I clicked the right button. I see a little black man in the corner. Huh? What do you mean? Well, if they don't want to hear me talk, tell them not to listen. Where's the mute button? Okay. Everyone looks like they're laughing. I must have missed something. She found the mute button, but it was still hilarious. Added hilarity for how tense and formal the event was supposed to be. Story 3. I have a different kind of story and the reason why you have to manually turn off your mic, camera on/off when you join a meeting. Years ago, a sales guy working for Cisco was on the road, so he was alone in a hotel room. I guess he had an 8 a.m. meeting, so the guy joins the WebEx, then proceeds to lay on his bed and rock one out while the whole meeting watched. He gets done and sees all the messages telling him his camera is on and promptly leaves the meeting. Cisco ends up firing the guy over this, and I believe he ended up suing for invasion of privacy and winning or something like that. So that, kids, is why you have to turn your camera on before every meeting or get notified that it is on. Story 4. Yes, I can finally tell my story. So this just happened last week. Oh, I'm a teacher, by the way. And so my district is doing this hybrid mode for school this year, meaning I have both in-person and online students in my classroom at the same time. In the middle of one of my blocks of instruction, we all have our lunch break. Usually, I just tell my online kids that they need to take their lunch break and then give them time to return, and then I'm taking my lunch break and everyone is gone and it's all good. I leave my video and my mic on the computer on because no one is usually in my room at lunch, except for last Friday. I found a cyst in my intimate parts and needed to call my doctor to get it looked at. I used my cell phone and was talking to my OB in a normal voice but clearly discussing sensitive things. Immediately after, I got a call on my room phone and it was the mother of one of the online students who had heard the whole thing because my computer mic had not been turned off, and she just wanted to let me know. I am still so embarrassed, but hey, lesson learned. Now I shut down everything for lunch. Guess the only thing more embarrassing than the call was the follow-up. Story 5. Not virtual, but I was a guest speaker at a vegan anti-fishing convention. I'm a mountain guide, fishing guide, and fishing guard, so they put this mic on me. During the break, I went outside through the back door and called home to tell them I would be home late. Well, I said exactly, I'm stuck here with these dumb vegan schmucks. Needless to say, my speech afterwards wasn't that welcomed. Let me explain. I'm not anti-vegan, not at all. I'm an environmentalist myself, and I'm very aware of the shady stuff of the meat and dairy industry and fish farming. I only consume meat, dairy products, and eggs farmed in my rural area from people I know, little farms that treat their animals the best way they can. My speech explained, more or less, that the river and the valley I operate on benefit very much from the popularity of fishing. The river is still very wild thanks to the sport. If it wasn't for fly fishing, dams would be built, embankments and canals too. The river is very clean, its water is so clean it is drinkable. All of this thanks to fly fishing enthusiasts that fought to preserve the river and its streams. Moreover, the only remaining population of bluefin grayling lives here, and if it was left to nature, they would be extinct for a foreign bird that hunts them, a bird that never lived here. And last, it's a cultural and historical heritage. A peculiar type of fly fishing was invented and developed here during the 1600s, and not practicing it would mean losing this knowledge and art of fly, rod, and line making. Handmade and artisan techniques would be lost. I was annoyed that I had to stay there and explain all of that to close-minded people. And all of that, I wasn't labeling them as idiots because they were vegans. Story 6. Not virtual learning, but a forgot to turn mic off moment for sure. I was attending an award ceremony at my kid's Catholic elementary school during the school day. The principal was this old, childless school marm type of woman, used to be a nun. The parents and younger siblings were filling into the gym to take assigned seats, 4 seats per family. The principal used a wireless mic attached to her ear to address families as they entered the gym. Surname with A through K, please take seats to the right, L through Z, seats to the left, or whatever. In the midst of this, she was called to the office over the PA system. She rushed out of the gymnasium doors and headed to the office. The wireless mic still attached and on, we could hear her walking, huffing, and puffing as she hurried to get there. Once at the office, the conversation between the school secretary and principal was heard through the speakers set up in the gym. Secretary: Daisy, Jacob's mother has arrived with 7 kids and another adult despite having been told that there were only 4 seats per family. I've asked her to leave and come back with herself and 3 others, but she has refused. For context, Daisy was running a day home, which was why she had so many kids with her. The school would normally have been fine with this, but they had issues with Daisy in the past where she did not and couldn't contain the flock of toddlers in her care, and kids had been hurt or broken expensive equipment in the past. As the secretary was giving the principal the details, Daisy pushes past and begins to proceed to the gym with all of the children. The principal attempts to ask her to stop, and Daisy ignores her totally. The door to the gym opens, and Daisy flies in with a gaggle of toddlers attached to each other by toddler leashes and a rope, with Daisy tied to the end of the rope. It was tied around her waist. Just as Daisy is trying to seat the herd of toddlers, principal begins to speak to the secretary again. I know, I tried to stop her and she blatantly ignored me. She needs to go back to where she came from. I wish these inconsiderate pieces of trash would all just go back to where they came from. These people just do not know how to behave. I quickly jumped out of my seat and bolted to the front office to let this wretched principal know that the entire gym had just heard her because her mic was on. I wasn't trying to protect her. She was saying mean stuff and there were a bunch of kids there, including my own 3-year-old at the time. Also bear in mind that this community was basically 70% minority-based, probably 50+% Filipino. Mic was turned off and about 10 minutes later the ceremony began as if nothing had happened. She was fired within a month of this incident after 30 years of service to the Catholic school system in our city. Story 7. I was babysitting my niece one day and she was in a virtual class, grade 6, with her English teacher, and she got in trouble for saying mean stuff and generally just being a little schmuck. After class ended, my niece went on a tirade using every word she can think of to describe her teacher. After I raised my voice at her for being so rude, inappropriate, and disrespectful and told her to give me her phone and laptop for the rest of the day because she lost her technology privileges, all of a sudden we hear from the laptop speaker, "You forgot to sign off. I heard all of that. I will be having a serious talk with your mother today." My sister raised her thinking it was hilarious to teach her words and encourage that type of behavior because she thought it was hysterical and taught her to never let anyone tell her she did anything wrong. And she has never been disciplined a day in her life, and this is the result. An out-of-control preteen who is the rudest and most absurdly disrespectful kid you can encounter with a sense of humor that would shock the creators of South Park. Story 8. I build websites for new entrepreneurs and also do weekly coachings with them so they know how to manage a site and how to start social media marketing. During these times, we use Zoom and the creative screen share feature so I can show them how things are done and then have them practice while I'm there to make sure they are getting it. What usually happens, especially with the older clients, is that they'll start bickering while unmuted. Or the wife, it's always the wife, starts to complain loudly that she doesn't understand how to do things when I ask her to take over and try something. It's always because they're not paying attention or taking it seriously. The thing that irks me the most is I encourage them to take notes, but they won't. I also will show you several times before I ask you to try and will say, okay, so to make sure you are getting it, I need you to mostly work from memory. Because if you're not pulling from memory, you're not learning. I'm here if you have questions and get stuck, but then I'll need you to try again until you can do it all on your own. I just want them to digest it before moving on to other lessons and stressing them out. I also give them a week to practice on their own time, but they often don't, and we have to start all over again. Even though I am patient, they will still complain like I can't hear them. Like, why did you sign up for this and pay when you aren't willing to do the work? Oh well, it's on them. My biggest pet peeve is when I host group classes and people unmute themselves while I'm trying to lead the lesson. I explain that they don't need to be on video or unmuted at the beginning of the call because I'm sharing my screen and speaking, but they do it anyway. Someone will cough several times and not mute themselves. Many times, people will yell at their spouse or kid to do something, or you'll get that person who's gassy and will keep on burping. Story 9. I have a really good one. I'm a pilot, and this happened back in college. I was working on my 4-year BS while getting my ratings and hours at our college's flight school. So we had this female supervisor who was known to be really strict and abrasive. I had many stage checks with her, and I actually liked her and got along great with her. She was strict and graded harshly, but she was very willing to answer as many questions and take as much time as needed to get something. Anyways, she clashed with a lot of the personalities of my fellow classmates. We had an open PA in our terminal and used a unicom so that students and supervisors could monitor the radio transmissions of the traffic in and around the pattern, as well as ground vehicles. In aviation, sometimes it is possible to get what's called a stuck mic or hot mic, and it's when the little push to talk button gets stuck in the down position, or someone accidentally keeps their finger on it, keeping it depressed. One day, I was in the terminal going over my weight and balance and weather brief for the flight I was about to take. I heard a call come over the Unicom PA, and it was very standard. Someone had just entered the pattern, but then we hear the mic stay open, and to our horror, yeah, supervisor's name is a total stuck-up. I don't know what's up with her, but I can tell you what I'd put up there for sure. And everyone hears this, and when I say everyone, I mean everyone. Everyone at all the hangars on the field, everyone on the ramp, the offices, the terminal, the briefing room where I was, and the front desk. All the supervisors have radios in their offices, and her door was open anyway, so if she didn't have her radio on, she definitely would have heard it in the hall coming from the front desk speakers. About 6 people at once begin stepping on the frequency to block out the stuck mic's clarity, and all of them warned him about the hot mic. After that, there was absolute silence, and I mean absolute silence. There wasn't a peep for what seemed like 10 minutes, but couldn't have been more than 2 to 4. Now, the funniest part about it was that the offending pilot and plane was inbound after a long training flight and had just entered the pattern to come in and land. It promptly exited the pattern and went off to the east. I guess they figured they needed to put some time and distance between themselves and whoever happened to be at the terminal. We got a department-wide email the next day about radio etiquette and mistreatment. It was ugly. Story 10. It was me. I left my mic on. I'm a student. A roll call was happening, and I said here when my name was called, and then I thought I turned off my mic, but I didn't. My dog walked into my room right after, and he's very old. He's losing his hearing and sight, so he's quite clumsy, and lo and behold, he beelines to my new guitar and knocks it over while looking for food on the ground. It was not in the case either, so it was very loud upon hitting the ground. I look over to see what my dog did and immediately yelled at him. "You stupid," I exclaimed. "That's a brand new guitar. Get out of here. I'm in class." Keep in mind, this dog can hardly hear, so you have to yell loudly and forcefully for him to even realize you are talking to him. It was pretty awkward, and I had to explain that I was talking to my dog and not a family member or something. Don't worry, I still gave the little senile treats and hugs later that day. Even though he breaks stuff, I still love him. Story 11. Happened during the last week of online courses at my university. It was 11:30 a.m. on a Tuesday when this happened. I talked to my group, and after answering, I forgot to mute again due to just being silent and listening. 5 minutes later, I got up with my device and went to the kitchen and started to prepare a caipirinha, a cocktail. Girlfriend called me. I took the call and told her something like, "Yes, I'm in class. No, they can't hear me. Fixing a drink. All right, but don't come too late. I might be buzzed. No classes this week and vacay mode on fire. Love you. No, it's my second. It's all good." The whole class fired up in the chat that a few had been drinking too, and even my professor laughed. Never did this before, but it was the last week and everybody related. I guess the only thing buzzing more than the chat was his second drink. Story 12. When 2020 started, I was in virtual classes for the quarter. I was in a class which starts recording the moment someone enters the Zoom call. I always arrived early, so one time I logged in about 30 minutes early so the recording started. I muted my mic, or thought I did. So there I am, eating mac and cheese, watching a terrible TV show that had many scenes in it. My classmate logs in about 5 minutes before class and texts me. They thought I was doing something inappropriate on the mic while watching scenes. The worst part, that's in the recording. Teacher never looked at recordings, just posted them. So there was a solid 30 minutes of what sounded like scenes and me eating at the start of that session. Anyone who watched that to take extra notes heard that. My name was on the screen because that's how Zoom works. I'm still red in the face thinking about it. Story 13. During a Zoom staff meeting, while it is silent because our heads are exploding, we hear, "What in the world?" Best part, our very sheltered principal who has never seen a scary movie agrees and isn't even mad that he said it out loud while we are being recorded. I know it got edited, but still. Here's the backstory. About a dozen of us teachers have taken professional development this summer to prep for remote teaching. The other dozen or so have done some reading, listened to some TED Talks, all provided by the district, and came to us for advice. So we all think we are good. We have some firm understanding of what we need to do during remote learning. And we have our first staff meeting 6 days before kids in our district hands down the remote teaching guidelines. Just drop them via email and say read them. We will talk in 20 minutes. They are totally polar opposite of everything we had learned. The professional development provided by our district and even the reading materials that our district gave us over the summer to break. We're all thinking, what in the world? But our guy just let it out and there was no mistaking what he was saying, but it does kind of sum it all up. Story 14. I was on a work training for work from home we'd been forced into, and a woman's little girl came into the room. You could hear the grandmother apologizing to mom, and the little girl just runs up and gives her mom a hug and says, I love you, mommy. Mom gives her a hug and says she loves her, but mama has to work now. A cheerful, okay, and a little girl leaves the room. Lazy schmuck trainer comes on and says, if that ever happens when you're on the phone with a customer, you will be fired immediately. I thought, what in the world has the world come to that such a wholesome, wonderful moment we were all smiling at had to be turned into a threat like that? Stuck around for a while but quit for something with less pay. It just angers me off so much. Story 15. We were taking an online chemistry exam while on Cisco WebEx, and from the first minute, this guy, who I'll call B, had his mic unmuted. We were supposed to have them muted as well as the webcam turned off. He was consulting every single answer with his particular teacher while insulting her for taking such a difficult exam. She recorded everything from the start, and after an hour or so, she had enough and called him out. T. B. B. Hold on, the witch is calling me. T. Yeah, and this witch will also be making you repeat a grade thanks to this recording worth an hour of both cringe and entertainment. The rest of the faculty members will laugh for years with this. He was so mortified that he just mumbled a low yes and left the video call. I swear this whole thing made me laugh so much it made me forget that I was crying because of how difficult it really was. Story 16. First of all, I'm very depressed. I'm currently in a state of no emotion. I'm always a quiet kid. A few weeks ago, we had a Zoom meeting. I was the only one who had my mic muted. Students were blabbering, not paying attention to the teacher. My teacher suddenly said, okay, everyone, make sure your mic and cam is on. Uh-oh, I didn't want to expose my horrible face or my voice. Ryan, could you please turn on the mic? The teacher said. I got sweaty. I wasn't ready. I still had my filthy hoodie on and my hair was all messy. So I sighed. I slowly reached the cursor to the cam on button. Phew, so glad that's out of the way. Then I reached for the mic unmute button. When I clicked it, I didn't realize I had a PH tab open. I had the video on pause, but then a fly landed on my hand. Out of surprise, I jumped and moved the cursor to the tab and clicked it. Loud sounds emanated from my MacBook. Everyone was quiet. 4 seconds of silence and everyone started to burst out in laughter. The teacher was furious. I felt so ashamed. I've stopped doing the deed since that day. I still remember that moment to this day, and it makes me so uncomfortable. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 17. My little ones are in 3rd grade. One kid took us to the bathroom with him. Thank God the camera was off. Man, we had a giggle over it. Thankfully, it was just number 1. Don't worry, nobody made fun of him and he was cackling too when he realized what he did. Same kid had a Darth Vader toy that played the Star Wars march. He was playing with it once during a lesson and didn't realize his mic was on. It ended up becoming a thing that he did at the beginning of every morning before we started in for the day. One day, he forgot to bring good old Darth and we wouldn't start until he brought it over and made it play the short clip from the song. I loved last year's class and it was relatively easy for us to transition to remote learning because we had such strong relationships. It's going to be weird making a community this year when we start behind computer screens. I really feel for these kids. I can't wait to start the year in person again when it's safe. Story 18. I have 2 stories about the same teacher. The first happened in the 2nd week of classes. She wanted us to work in partners and describe how the other person taught. I'm not such a sociable person and all my friends didn't re-enroll in this semester. So I explained that to the teacher and she let me work with an already made team even when we were now 3. At the end of the class, when everyone was disconnecting, she realized one classmate didn't do the work and she told him, "Why didn't you do the activity? What, you also have no friends?" I was so mad and for the rest of the semester, I wasn't so nice to her. The second one was in the last week of the semester. She wanted us to do a test and we only had 15 minutes to do it and upload it to the platform. I take classes on my laptop, but if I try to do something else while I'm in a call, like opening another window or turning on my camera, it will freeze. So I use my phone to write and send everything, but since last year, sometimes when it gets too hot or if you press the power button wrong, it'll turn off and will be turning on and off for minutes. Well, that happened while I was doing the test. I told that to the teacher and told me to record it with another phone, because I obviously have another phone and use the bad one, right? Anyways, I remembered that I sent a screenshot of my answers to a classmate and told the teacher if that would be proof enough to be able to send the test after the class was over, and she laughed when she read my message. When I pointed out that I saw her laughing, she justified herself, saying that her daughter did something funny in the background. I just hate that teacher, but I had a clean 100% in her assignment. Story 19. Not at Mike, but my freshman year of college, we had to make a mandatory how to do basic things on a computer class to make sure everyone had at least a minimum competence with them. It was a good idea, but I was, and am, a bit of a nerd, so it was kind of like forcing me to take a remedial alphabet class. Anyway, we were in class and the professor was showing us how to use the cutting-edge technology of internet chat rooms. I'm sure it was super informative to some people, but at that point, I had been using AOL Instant Messenger to chat with my high school friends for years, so again, mind-numbing. I was curious about how the message would display because I never chose a username or anything. Anyway, being young and dumb, I typed something less than advisable to test it out. Turns out this program just used the real name of the user whose account was used to sign on to the computer. Also important to note, the professor had the chat screen up on the projector so the whole class saw on both their own screen and the big screen at the front of the computer lab. My real name. This class is boring and pointless. The professor saw it, stuttered a bit in the middle of his presentation, then decided to keep on going like nothing ever happened. It never got brought up again and I never got in any trouble, so 10 out of 10 would insult again. Story 20. I'm a reporter and was watching a city council meeting that was taking place over Zoom, and one of the city councilmen was getting a haircut from his son. This was when barbershops and salons were still closed and his son is a barber. He had the little cape thing over him to keep the trimmed hair off of him. When his son was done, he took off the cape. There was no shirt underneath, walking around his entire house holding his phone up, not realizing we could see him just like he could see us. All the other councilmen politely ignored it, but the local attorney couldn't help himself. His eyes bugged out and he started laughing. I was so glad I had muted myself and turned my camera off because I was laughing so loud. 2 minutes later, the meeting adjourned. The city manager called me frantically, trying to apologize for what I'd seen. LOL. If it matters, I'm a woman and was the only woman at the meeting. I just laughed some more and told him not to worry about it. Story 21. For graduation from my university, our department decided to have a separate online ceremony that we could invite our family and friends to. Since there weren't many people graduating from our department, it was a small affair and most of us are very close friends who helped and pushed each other in each of these classes to do our best. At the beginning, when everyone is gathering in the lobby, my friends all wave at each other and ask how one another is doing, and generally just congratulate one another. That is, until the professors start to join the meeting, then promptly mute our mics and wait in silence for the ceremony to begin. We all but one of us. My friend, who I've taken several classes with, didn't realize his mic was on and was showing his wife who everyone was. A professor that my group and I found to be particularly strict entered the meeting and waved hello to all of us. He points to his screen and says, in all seriousness, "That's the one I told you about. Wow, she doesn't look so evil today." His volume must have been turned down as well because she turns on her mic and laughs and says, "Oh yeah, just today?" To bring more context to this professor was from Korea and brought some of her country's teaching methods to the classroom, which most of us found difficult, making the comment that much more cringeworthy. He finally sees me and says, "Oh, that's also the one I told you about. She's pregnant." I turn to my partner and hold back tears. I see my parents get tense as well as a few of my friends. I had a termination at the school and only had the emotional energy to tell some people and one of my professors that was in the Zoom meeting. They all heard it and looked away from their screen trying to be nonchalant about it. I finally texted him that his mic was on after a few more inappropriate comments. Yes, people, please, check your mics. Story 22. I worked for a large tech company once with a CTO who was really good but kind of a hard schmuck. At his peak, he had so many managers under him, they couldn't all fit in the same meeting room, so we had each site video conference their meeting room and then one dial-in number. The dial-in was notorious for people calling in but forgetting to mute, and they weren't listening to be reminded to mute their phone. Often, the CTO would tell everyone to hang up, call back. It irritated the hell out of him. One day, someone forgot and his phone was right next to the keyboard and computer speakers, so we kept hearing this one guy type, answer PMs, and then he took a phone call on his personal cell where he bragged about getting a great deal on a BMW. One key point was, they wanted X amount of dollars, but I drew them down to X amount of dollars. The CTO was Jewish, and now he was furious. After that meeting, he called around to find out which manager had recently bought a BMW. It didn't take long to find the guy. The manager's punishment was if he didn't want to be fired, he had to drive down to our location for every CTO meeting, which was an hour's drive in bad DC traffic, and attend in person. Story 23. My son was an 8th grader last year. When virtual classes had been going on for a month or two, I swung by the living room where he was attending social studies. He'd been given an assignment to do during the period, but the teacher also messaged that kids should log into the Google meeting. I noticed my son had not joined the meeting and gave him a hard time, so he reluctantly joined. He immediately lowered the sound so we could not hear anything going on in the meeting, disabled his camera, and switched tabs. I started lecturing him about paying attention. What if his teacher is giving a lesson or asking questions? He won't know anything that's going on in virtual class. My son vociferously explained that he doesn't need any of that BS. He gets it, he can do the work, nothing is going to happen in class, and no one, including the teacher, is going to say anything remotely interesting. He doesn't need to listen to that junk. I turned the volume on just in time to hear his teacher say, "Your mic is on, I can hear everything you're saying." Story 24. I did this the other day during class. My engineering professor was doing the live lecture and my brother came in and asked me to take a look at an algorithm he was working on. I had my mic on and my entire class listened to me talk to my brother about this algorithm and the applications for it before I pointed out that he had just forgot a negative sign in front of the first 4 questions in his equation. This was a good 4 or 5 minutes of me looking at the algorithm before I found the problem. The professor actually stopped talking and was listening to me talk to my brother just with this look on his face, and then I realized my mic was on. I apologized profusely and muted it for the rest of the lecture, and the professor messaged me about it before leaving the chat, just asked that I refrain from consulting with my think tank during his class. I messaged him back that that was just my brother needing a fresh set of eyes for a project, and he said that was fine, and he even offered to take a look at any equations or code we might need a fresh set of eyes for before politely reminding me that I was paying for these classes, so I needed to pay attention to actually learn the material. The professor is a cool dude, but he does get mildly annoyed when you weren't paying attention. Story 25. We have this one student in our class who's never turned on their video or audio, not once in 4 months of online classes. When asked about it via chat, they'd always reply that their mics were broken. This particular class, they accidentally leave their mic on and there's some disturbance from their side. The teacher who has been trying to get them to respond doesn't miss the opportunity and asks them to speak up. The teacher spoke in a firm yet kind tone. The student bursts up and starts to apologize. They said that they could not muster up the courage to respond back. The teacher consoles them repeatedly, saying that it's fine and that this can be an anxiety-provoking situation for everyone. She shared how this is all new to her too and that we're all learning together. Everyone then shared bits of how they too found it awkward and embarrassing at first. Story 26. Thinking about it still gives me anxiety and probably the most embarrassing thing I've done because I've tried to erase this from my memory ASAP. The story isn't that accurate, but close to it. So my network security class is a hybrid class with optional in-person classroom lectures and reviews about once a week that you can attend virtually too. Unfortunately for me, I work at a school job and my shift that day was 5 to 7 p.m. Very basic, small hours, part-time uni job for experience sake. A week and a half was the midterm, and the professor thought that for this week's in-person classroom visit was worth the time to review and ask questions for the midterm. Knowing this, I thought, oh man, I should probably join this virtually to help study and review. It was 7 p.m. and my shift was done and I was waiting for my mom to pick me up. I thought it was great because on the trip back home, I could totally listen to the Zoom app on my phone and tune into the review session. It was nice because the professor has a good habit of recording the in-person classroom sessions for those people who couldn't attend in person, and then he'll upload the video on YouTube. 3 days before the midterm, I thought to myself I should watch the video he uploaded and recorded of the review session to see what I missed out from the first half hour. Turns out the mobile version of Zoom needs access to your phone's microphone to even start listening into the call, and the permissions the app was calling for was annoying because I didn't want to enter the voice call myself and just wanted to listen in. But the only way to listen in was to enable voice and join in the voice call. So I wasn't sure if I truly enabled or disabled voice after entering, after all that confusing permissions. And what happened? My 35-minute car ride home of me and my mom talking in broken Chinglish, English, and Chinese about my day at work and classes got recorded in that YouTube video. And my audio and car sounds were really, really loud, so basically 60% of the video in the middle of the class was ruined and unintelligible lecture-wise. To put salt into the wound, I was totally embarrassed because the video has been out for a week and I didn't look at that video and classmates already commented about the video barely unintelligible, and I only found out 3 days prior to the midterm. So in my embarrassing panic, I quickly typed up an apology email that I wanted to send to the professor, but on the send to who tabs, I was using Canvas messaging. Turns out I accidentally sent the message to the whole class saying it was me and I apologized and suggested solutions for next time's recording and virtual classroom meetups and not the professor. So then I had to actually resend it to the professor this time. I wanted to cry and still do after typing and reliving this again. Story 27. I do online education regardless if there's a pandemic, so I've been doing it for the past 4 years. The best one was when my math teacher learned that the on and off button on his mic didn't actually work. So I was doing my mocks, England GCSEs, and he was reading something to himself and he clearly didn't like it, so mumbled, "What in the world?" To which I put an XD face and he got very confused. Then I, along with the rest of the class, which consisted of about 4 other people, typed into the chat that your mic is still on, to which he responded, "Oh man." I laughed really hard. He had his camera on and I just saw the color drain from his face. The best part is that my teachers are meant to upload the recording to the student portal page, to which he didn't because there was only going to be quietness while the students did the mocks. That was his excuse, at least. The next best one is when my history teacher turned on his camera. It's not normally on, right at the beginning of class to show us his kitten. She was very cute. Later, when he was explaining the task he was setting us, he heard this psh, and then he turned his mic off. It turned out his cat had jumped onto him with her nails. Story 28. This is going to get buried, but it was our final review Zoom for a difficult math class last semester. Honestly, I think I spent a lot of the lecture typing a reply to someone in Discord and not paying as much attention as I should have been. I was one of maybe 15 out of 100 plus people in the class to attend this Zoom, so hey, at least I kinda tried. I took some notes, but it took me closer to the end to stop typing on my loud mechanical keyboard and just pay attention. I was trying to work along with the problems and I'm bad at basic algebra, so went to check my work with a calculator, which you shouldn't need in this class, lol. And I literally sang, "Where is my calculator?" And the teacher goes, "Sorry, did someone have a question?" And I realized my mic isn't muted and I wanted to pass away. I stream so I know how loud my mechanical keyboard is. If my mic was live that whole time, no one was going to be able to hear his recording of this final review lecture, which I assume everyone in the class will want to reference. I put my mic on mute and never said anything ever again. I didn't even check the recording because I was too embarrassed and I would have felt horrible knowing I ruined people's final review video for a really hard class with my stupid mechanical keyboard. An embarrassing extra stupid song about needing a calculator for stuff I shouldn't at that level. You think your mic is always muted, you check to make sure, and you think these stories will never happen to you, but trust me, they can, y'all. Story 29. I don't have any mic moments, but I usually join calls on my phone because I don't trust installing Zoom on my computer, but also because my laptop's camera and microphone are both broken. But once Zoom failed on the first day, we switched to Google Meet and I had to screen share an About Me slide. That solves video and I had an external mic for audio. Once I was finished, I stayed on my computer and didn't switch back to my phone. Now, months ago, I decided to install a program that recorded my screen and forwarded the signal to the webcam channel as if I had a virtual webcam. Easy screen sharing. I forgot I had this, and when I joined the call, it had defaulted to that virtual camera since the regular webcam was broken. I got caught gaming Minecraft on my first day of school, saying obscene things in the chat. That same day, I made an omelet during class, and my teacher saw and told me I wasn't allowed to make in-class omelets anymore. But my friends had my back and started saying, #FreeTheOmelet in chat. Story 30. Obligatory, not virtual learning, but while I was running sound for a high school theater production. So there's this cool thing that you can do with some soundboards that let you record all of the inputs and then play it back through all of those inputs, if that makes sense. I use it to record big songs and play it back to the actors and people backstage so that they can hear what it sounds like in the house. Well, I've heard practically everything from those mics, from bad things about me to gossip to very bad singing. Well, this one tops them all. I should add, by the way, that you cannot mute these mics without turning them off, which I have locked because they're teenagers. So everything they say with the mic on goes to my soundboard even when they aren't saying anything on stage. Well, I was playing back this recording to myself so that nothing bad accidentally comes out, and all of a sudden, I hear a girl talk about what sounds like her first time. She's describing in great detail what happened. I'm shocked and just mute that mic so that none of that goes to the house. While everything goes off well, the actors like what they hear and no one else knows about that girl's intimate life. After rehearsal, I'm sitting in my booth and see her reading a book. I asked her what she's reading and she said, "Oh, it's just a novel I have to read for my English class. Want to hear the funny part?" So I said, "Sure." And she proceeded to read me what I had heard over her mic. So it turns out she wasn't talking about her intimate life, thankfully. Story 31. University here. We were doing training the week before classes began for our peer tutors, so while not technically a class, these kids were still expected to engage in the lesson and be respectful. We had been going for 2 hours when suddenly I heard one of the kids yell out statements along the lines of, "Drop the bomb there," and a few other obscene phrases. His mic kept muting, unmuting on his own, and my best theory was that he had pushed to talk in Zoom, but it was overlapping with something he needed to press in his game he was playing instead of paying attention. I administratively muted him, but his push to talk kept unmuting himself, so I removed him entirely. I had a good laugh internally since I kept trying to say something to get his attention and let him know so that he would at least be respectful about multitasking, but he didn't hear me and no one else in the lesson thought it was funny. I'm not a supervisor. We have two halves to our tutoring center and he was in the other half, but we share training. So I don't know if he's still with us or not. I multitask a lot during online meetings, but I've never been that blatant. Well, if you could relate to any one of these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.